All right, welcome to another episode of the Love Experience. I got myself, James Hill. Who else we got?
You got your lovely wife, Dr. Hill.
Okay. All right, who we got in the building today?
You got your big brother, Larry Carey.
Okay.
And what do you do, Larry?
I am the climate and culture systems consultant for a district here in Columbus, but I also have a consultant business, an education consultant business called Larry Carey Ltd. Also an author and did a little bit of acting.
Oh.
So if you've seen the movie Shirley on Netflix, you see the back of my head.
Everybody
My two
start
kids.
somewhere. You got to start
Yeah,
somewhere.
you got to start somewhere. But I was there. My two little lines, I didn't make it, but I made the commercial.
And then we have, who we have? My beautiful soul boy.
Hey, Antoinette Bates. I am the co-founder of Honest Work Studios. I am also an educator of 28 years. I'm a lot of things. I'm very excited to be here and talk about the love.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. And we got, who else we got here in the building?
Nanika Bonds. I'm an educator for 24, 25 years. I'm also a lot of things. I'm also a parent. And the wife to this man right here.
Yeah.
How long
lovely
y'all
wife.
been married?
What are we?
17?
17.
17 years.
Okay.
17 years.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Emmanuel Bonds, same educator. I've been working with children pretty much all of my adult life. I've coached numerous sports for Columbus City. Like the rest of you guys, I have a lot of different hats, but I'm all about, Black love and community. So
All
I'm happy to
right.
be here.
That's cool. All right. So this episode, we wanted to talk about education. Today, we got a lot of educators in the building. So we're going to have a discussion about Black education and what's that look like to the Black family. The Board of Commissions in Franklin County, they had a declaring racism as a public health crisis back in May 19th, 2020. So where are we at as right now with racism in the school districts or in the classroom?
Where are we? Racism is in a lot of places, every day, all day. I believe that racism exists just in the sheer structure of the educational system. The system was not designed for us. In
Say that
spite
again.
of that,
Say that
we
again.
have thrived. We have created our own spaces, but in its inception, we weren't part of the equation. So I think if we never deal with the fact that the inception was corrupt and we just keep putting Band-Aids on top of it, I don't think we do ourselves or our children the justice they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that because I always say, I really love looking at the documentaries of our history and how we end up being integrated. And one of the things that, I push at the district level and when I travel all over the country speaking to people, the system is designed, doing exactly what it's designed to do, right? We were not, the educational system for America was not designed for people that look like me. We involved ourselves into a system that wasn't for us. So we cannot get mad at the system because we embedded ourselves in a system that wasn't designed for a group of people that look like us. But now that we are in, what can we do to ensure that all our scholars get a great learning experience? But that's the one biggest thing. Like, we keep fighting against something that is not even for us. So why don't we go back? Because when you look back before we was included, when they embedded, you might have like 1, 2 Blacks going into a school. Did any of the teachers go?
Right.
No, they would not even let the teachers go and be integrated in those schools.
Which then influenced what the students were receiving, the 1 or 2 that were allowed in the space. It still was still never our agenda.
It was still never our agenda.
It was, yeah.
And then my question is, since we have so many educators, why don't we start Black independent schools? Like, what is the delay of us creating our own independent schools since we know these systems do not work for us?
My wife and I, we've had this conversation a great deal. Um, I think with regards to that, and I know we've talked about you guys starting your own school. Um, it's really I believe the big part of it is really the mentorship. Like, who do you go to get the knowledge that you really need to start your own independent school? And with regards to that, how do you go about fundraising? Like our child goes to a private school, and I think a large part of what we do like about it is that the core enrichment they receive, not just the education, but also the core enrichment. She and I discuss this all the time. But for him, it's top notch. Like, we have a child with special needs, so him learning to be independent. I think was last year or year before he ended up going to Disney World,
Yes, last year.
like on his own.
Right. That's
And for him, that was a major. But I love the school because when he first got there, he had 3 teachers assigned to a classroom, right? It wasn't a large classroom. So he got the independent attention that he needed to improve as far as academically. And I, for me, that if I, when we do, I'm speaking to existence, when we do start our school, that's, I think, going to be a major focal point that I want more than just one teacher in the classroom. I don't want it to be a large class where one teacher has, 25 or 30 students and they can't really focus or give the students that really need that direct or explicit instruction. I want 2 or 3. 3 would be ideal because I've seen the blueprint and I've seen it work. So I think that would be a huge benefit when we do start something like that. But it's, for me, it's really, like I said, the mentorship. How do you get it started? Who do you need to connect with? You know what I'm saying? And
Well, you said a piece that I think when I do think about schools, and I've had people ask me frequently, like, "Oh, do you want to start your own school?" When they first hear that you're an educator and how long you've been in, and they're thinking you should take that expertise and yes, open a school. I think that when you're an educator and you understand the complexity of not just opening a school for the numbers or to get young people in the door, but really being able to have the programming and the supports there. You think of the resources. And then I think it does take us back to the history, at least for me, it does. How did we get to this point? We ended up in this point from going from segregated schools, which, let's not forget, were Black excellence was at the top
yes,
tier in those segregated schools. Many of them Black segregated schools in the South. But we became integrated because of resources, the lack
The
of
lack.
resources. And so if we start there, because I feel like we're still there, who is going to fund the school where we can not just be separate and unequal? Because I've been in some of these charter schools and they're not funded properly. And I've seen the results when schools, yes, you have a lot of brown and Black faces, young people there. The parents are counting on you to work miracles. And a lot of times the resources and the budget isn't there to really support, give those wraparound services that we know that young Black and brown people need a lot of times, especially if they're coming from deficits of poverty and just a lack of generational education and being literate. I really feel like that to open up a school, I would definitely want it to be a school that was able to offer young people what they really need and looking to excellence.
I say Black excellence at
Yeah.
all times. And I know you have been in both public, private,
Charter.
charter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done I've seen it all. And funding is an issue no matter where you are. Educate. I feel like Thanos really snapped his fingers at COVID because people just are gone. You know, like we don't
Yes.
have enough teachers, we don't have enough bus drivers, we don't have enough cafeteria workers, we don't have enough anything all of a sudden, right? And so that also impacts everything because
Absolutely.
for whatever reason, the children's numbers did not decrease. The adult numbers definitely did. So you're talking about classrooms that are overcrowded, right? You've got 28, 30, 35 kids in a classroom that with one person who
Mhm.
might not even be considered highly qualified anymore because we are now at a place of desperation across the nation of taking in educators, right? So even that is another element because you have people who didn't go to school for this in front of our children. And and we don't talk about some of the other issues that need to be addressed because we as educators we teach, right?
Mm.
We do all the things. But there's an element that's missing even in teacher education,
Mm.
and that is applied behavioral analysis. We
Mm.
don't talk about the behaviors and the
Mm.
antecedents of behaviors that trigger from trauma.
Mm.
And then we want to address the trauma reaction in the classroom, but we don't address the trigger or the antecedent
Right.
to that trauma. And then we want to kick the kid out and we want to, you know what I mean? So there's so many layers to this onion of education that in a school that is for Black children, Black and brown children, children who are underserved and underrepresented, we have to take in wraparound services that deal with beyond math, English, science, and social studies. But we also need to make sure that we provide them with quality sports programs because charter schools don't do that, with the exception of one that is super well funded. The rest of them don't have the resources to be able to provide quality athletic programs for our students who do aspire to be athletes. So when I was in a charter school, I was trying to figure out, okay, well, why would a kid want to come here
Mhm.
when they could go to XYZ school down the street? So we brought in career tech ed because media arts is my passion. So we're like, okay, well, we're going to find, because every student doesn't want to be an athlete,
That's
right?
true.
So then you have to find that thing that will bring students into where you are. So I just think that there are so many, and I'm hoping that we come up with more answers than questions, but I think the initial part of these conversations present questions first. How do we get funding? Now, to charter a school, I've chartered 3, so I know how that part works. I know that part. And I know like where you find it in the Ohio Department of Education, for example, and what the steps are to get through that process. So that piece, not that hard. It's a little tedious, but it's not that hard. But the funding of it to be able to make sure that you're getting highly qualified people and that you have all of the wraparound services, that you have social workers and that you have athletics and that you have all the things, that's another issue. Who's going to pay for this? Are we willing to put our money where our mouth is in what we say we want for our young people?
So that brings me to a question, as because all of you guys have had a lot of aha moments, right? Because we know we want to start to build more schools of excellence for our kids, because our kids absolutely deserve it. Our families absolutely deserve it. But the hindrance and the different barriers that is plagued takes us way back to why we was trying to integrate in the first place, right? So we built these schools. I've been to several charter schools as a guest, and I've seen some of the things. One, there may be charter, but now them are not funded by Black people. So you're not going to get the excellence that we think we deserve, right? Because the funding is coming from a different source that don't look like us. But how can we compete with the big time schools who have every resource that our kids deserve? Only thing that's lacking is the biases and the racism that's inside those plagued inside those schools and all those other things. You're competing, but then they popping up. Charter schools are popping up like I drink Kool-Aid, right? Like it's a charter school now on every corner. It might be 2 or 3, but it's not of excellence when you walk up in there. Or we don't have the money and we're putting them in environments that, to me, I told my husband, I don't want a school if it's not going to be to where the caliber of where I expect my kids to enter.
Absolutely.
Right. So when I look and I see, dirt and mice and other those things. I don't want to insert our kids into those environments
Right.
because they don't deserve it just because it's a black school. But then now Larry and I, the new caveat to it now, you can be a teacher now. What's the bill? You could be a teacher without even going into
Senate Bill 168.
education class.
That's right.
And that's how I was gonna piggyback on you real quick on that. Senate Bill 168 made it to where you can come off the street anytime Dick and Harry can come off the street and be a teacher.
That's
As
right.
long as the district or the school says, hey, I'll give you PD, and this is the short version. I know there's a longer read, but as long as we promise to give you PD and you say, hey, I'll go to school, get my alternative license, you can become a teacher. And it also kind of stripped away the power from ODEW now.
Right.
I think it was like 14 clauses in there that stripped the power away. So it's kind of like just killing education. And it goes back to the first question about racism and everything else, the funding. My personal belief is they're trying to keep us down. It's a class system, right? The top 1% is going to continue to get the education. Y'all talking about charter schools? I'm not a big fan of charter schools,
He's not.
but I do see some, like, for example, I use this example a lot with funding. Columbus Academy, when they did the voucher systems and they gave it $8,000 per student, and the numbers could be a little off. So if so, please forgive me. But Columbus Academy, I do know, and I probably shouldn't even say their name. I do know they raised their tuition, and I do know there was some schools saying, "Hey, parents, fill out this voucher because we're going to give you $1,000 off." So even those types of schools are not made for our kids. They don't want them kids in there. They only bring them or only ask if it's sports related. They got a good team. Hey, you're a good football player. Your grades are fine. Come here. We'll help you out. That's almost the same with even our public schools, right? With sports. If you notice that we have a lot of our players leaving, good players leaving to go to the suburb schools because they don't have the same equities that they have in CCS. There's a player at one of your schools, I won't even say it, at one of your schools who moved around 3 times, and now he's in Gahanna doing well. Like, he's getting looked at but they have better fields in Gahanna.
Better resources.
It's almost like they're being recruited, isn't it?
I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
We know it
Isn't that
happens.
weird? Yeah.
We know it
They
happens.
know we're in high school and middle school, you're being recruited for sports. Like, to me, it's mind blowing.
Like that's the only thing that we're really good at,
But then,
right?
but then we have to. We're saying there's no funding. There is funding. It's called the Black Church.
So
It's called the NAACP.
So that was
It's
going to be
called
my
the Urban League.
So that was going to be my next question. If we know, if we have the answers and we know
Yeah.
the solutions, why aren't our communities backing up these schools to get what we need? And then why are we leaving education in numbers? We have so many African American educators leaving in droves. So to your point, War, we don't have bodies. We do not have bodies. I like the bill I was telling him when we had that conversation about the new bill. I like it to the point of we do have a lot of Black educators who did go to school for education but couldn't pass that test. So this will give them the opportunity now to actually do what they want, they went to school for, because of that test is bias. We all know that. A lot of us had to take it 12 times, right? Like I didn't, but I mean,
Like
I took it twice.
One time.
But
And I went forward.
I
Test
took it
taker.
twice, but I met so many people who have had to take it so many times to actually get that license. But we know it's a lot of
It's
bias.
the way out.
Yeah, right. But so I like that the law where they can, but also we have so many of us that do have those licenses and are leaving knowing that we need you. I don't want the ones that look like me that don't care. This have to be out there. I'm talking about the ones that left the system who believes in Black excellence, who really can speak life and touch our kids in so many great ways. We're leaving.
The
So,
caveat.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the caveat there, though, is they're going to continue to say, okay, you don't have a license, so I can continue to pay you crap.
Yeah.
And that's one of the
Right.
biggest issues why our educators are leaving. Like, I do a lot of work with the aspiring educators and the new educators, and I think it's still 2 to 3 years that educators are leaving in droves after they graduate.
And they're not
Right.
replacing themselves.
Exactly.
So in schools, they're not even going. You got
So
younger people not
that's
even going to education.
why, like, honestly, when they talk about the shortage, my mind is starting to go somewhere else. When they talk about a teacher shortage, there's not a teacher shortage. We have tons of people that are qualified that are leaving because you're not treating them how they're supposed to be
Right.
treated.
That part.
Example, Columbus Police. I don't know if you know this, but I think the salary is what, 106 now after 5 years? Anyone can be a police officer. You can be 18, go take the test. You got,
Right.
well, I
High
think
school
it's like
diploma.
I think it's like a, once you get out the academy, I think there's like a period, but at 5 years, they max out at 106. $106,000 a year. I can be 23 making that.
Mm-hmm.
No education, only the 6 months training I get there, the training hours. I mean, I'm not hating on that. The job's important, but why can't we do that for our educators? Firefighters, the same thing, similar. They make less in the city of Columbus. I haven't looked at their contract in a while, but it's like, if you want to keep teachers or educators, principals, whatever, prepare professionals. I mean, why, like,
Why you nickel and dime?
we got, you
Yeah.
can work at some McDonald's or Amazon making more than what some of our paraprofessionals make right now.
That was my
And
biggest
their
fight.
job is as important as us, because they still got to make the relationships. They actually help out with some of the great ones, the good ones, but they help out with tier 2, tier 3 supports.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
They are extended hand of us. So why do we nickel and dime our teachers, our educators, and especially us? Think about down, like, I can go on a whole tangent with pay.
Well, think about how many educators are carrying debt.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
especially when we begin to talk about our Black and brown teachers. They're carrying debt. They come from families who they may have been first, second generation to go to college. So when you're talking about, yes, this teacher needs to be highly qualified, not only are you talking about the bachelor's degree, then you're talking about the licensure. Now you're talking about the master's degree. We were talking before we started about the advanced degrees that a lot of Black teachers have. Well, a lot of Black teachers that I know also carry the debt from all of that education.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're looking at teachers, I've always been one that has said, I also feel that raising the bar in the standard of how many degrees and license that you need as an educator was also part of the systemic weed out
Mm-hmm.
for recruiting Black and brown teachers. That was part of the systemic weed out. Like, we don't want you unless you can afford. I mean, because when you think of it in that way, you have to be able to afford financially, have the time to give. When we also know that teaching is an art, just as much as it is a science. And so you have a lot of people who have gone to school, they're educated in the theory of education because the test is the theory. But then when it comes to practical application, then now see, that's where the
Some of them
divide.
got that gift.
They
don't
don't
got-
have
But
the
can
talent.
they learn it?
No.
I say no.
You say no?
No.
I
No?
say
I
no.
say both.
I-
Yes,
I
I
said
said it
yeah.
depends.
It depends on the person.
It
'Cause
depends
I
I
think
on.
it
agree.
can be adequate.
I agree with that. It
But-
depends on the person.
But y'all think about it in
Adequate.
education department, because we all educators, when we took those courseworks, it was only one class on class management. Most of it was you were going to school. If I was specializing in math, I was going to learn about the theories for math. You didn't tell me back in the day I need to learn about social, emotional, trauma, all of that stuff. We didn't have to worry about that. I just did it naturally because that's who I am as a
Yeah.
person, right?
Empathy.
So some of our teachers, when we do our walkthroughs, it's not natural for you to be empathetic. It's not natural for you to know each one of your scholars that enter your space. It's not natural to recognize the triggers and that the triggers that I might play in some of the behaviors. It's not natural. Some people look at you like, huh? So, but they were never taught.
Mhm.
that. And the professional developments, we want to keep it real. On professional development
Yeah.
days, it's always academic based. It's never talking. We're not talking about the whole child. We're not getting training on how on trauma. We're not getting
Best
training on
practice.
restorative. We're not getting trained on PBIS. We're not getting trained on none of that.
And
We're getting everything
but-
is math, ELA,
Right.
math and ELA.
But-
When
And
we
if
talk
you
about
get,
maybe a little
if
bit
you
of
get,
science.
if you
With
get
little to
trained,
middle.
if you do get trained on it, it is an abstract.
Yes.
Because while I was in this district that shall not be named for 21 years, there were, I went to PBIS stuff and SEL wasn't a thing yet. It wasn't a hot topic yet.
It wasn't.
Definitely not anything that had to do with applied behavioral analysis or understand anything about triggers and trauma. There might have been a trauma informed care, PD here and there, but how to apply that in a classroom
Right.
when it is happening and you have a child who is going off and having whatever
In
emotional
crisis.
outburst.
And it's about 20, 30 kids in the classroom.
And you got to figure out how
Yeah.
to save
Yeah.
the other 29
Right.
Correct.
because this one is having a moment. That is not taught and it's not reiterated. So
Mm-mm.
to say that we don't cover it all, they definitely it gets a tertiary look over. You know what I mean?
Correct.
It's
Right.
it's covered for the sake of that grant or whatever it
Right.
is that is funding
Mhm.
that thing. But to actually go into your room and spend some time with you and mentor you as you are
Mhm.
navigating this space is a whole different
That's the
thing.
piece.
Because to
Mhm.
your point, there are some people who are innately maternal and paternal as educators, right? They are innately that.
Right.
But there are people who are very much systemic learners. If you don't show them the
Mhm.
process,
They won't get it.
they're not going to know that that's a thing they're even supposed to be.
Right.
So you can learn it, right? You got to want it.
You don't
Mhm.
want it.
And you got to see the value in the person that you're giving it to also. I would tell my students and even my staff members, if you see a student and you don't bother to correct their behavior, you don't value them enough as a
You
human
don't
to say anything to them.
say that.
Ooh.
So all of the people
Yes.
who a kid is like, oh, I can turn out in Miss XYZ's
Mhm.
class. That's because she don't value you enough to tell you about yourself.
Right.
Right.
Because you can't get that off in Miss Bond's class.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get that off
Mm-hmm.
in Doc's class. You can't get that off.
Right.
And the reason you can is because they value you enough to say this behavior is not conducive to the life that you think you want for yourself.
Mhm.
Right.
So let me help you be a better human.
Yes.
We always tell teachers that are especially our newer teachers that are struggling a little bit, like everything that you do has to be intentional. You have to plan everything out.
Everything.
It's not
Everything.
bad to plan. How you have your room set up, everything has to be meticulous, especially when you're working with our babies, right? That's where we always talk about the systems and structures, putting them in place. If you don't have that piece down, you're never going to touch the academics. Your kids are always going to be low.
That's right.
And this is
That's
where, especially first year teachers going in your second year, first year, like go ahead and make sure you learn that curriculum. Because like, for example, when I was at Trevitt, I taught there 6 years in my school. Only school I'll go back to teach. But anyway, when I was there, my first year, after I learned that curriculum, I knew that we would get through the whole curriculum by the end of March. So I knew I had an extra, 8 weeks, 7 weeks of stuff. So at that time, this is when you start filling out, am I going to plan monthly, plan weekly? No, I started planning daily because it was like, all right, and this worked for me. It might not work for everybody, but planning daily, I could see, all right, they might not have got the letter A. So I need to go over the letter A again. What other things can I get to show them how to make a letter A? Draw the letter A, uppercase A, lowercase a. Can they make the sound? The number one, same thing. Also, do I need to make sure because we always in circles in pre-K, but can I make sure how my circle is? How are my kids? Okay, I know I got 7 kids that are like, boom, they got it. How can I make them helpers? How can I empower them to help empower them? How can I build that community? Everything has to be intentionally planned. You can't come in half-stepping.
And be
And
lazy.
then you got to remember every day's a new day too. I had a little boy who ate my chicken.
He
I'm sorry, I'll
got
never forget that little boy. No, I'll never forget him. I ran into him. It took me a while to get that. I mean, look,
Take it
behaviors,
personal.
communication.
Take it all personal. Like, dude.
Behaviors of communication, and you got to crack the code. And sometimes it's not going to, we expect everything to be quick. And it's not going to be quick all the time. It took time to work with him. He did eat my chicken and said it was nasty, though. It was hurt my feelings.
I would have made him eat it.
Yeah. You're right. Like, you don't eat my chicken in the
I was
end. You
shocked.
tell me it's nasty.
Right.
I'm disrespectful, right?
How many educators are self-reflective in their practice?
Oh. Woo.
You know what I mean?
That's my
That's a big
biggest.
piece.
That
That's
is
a huge piece. That's a huge piece.
That's my biggest thing that I ask, and I'm really pushing for all educators. I don't care
Oh.
what role that you play in an educational space. Every day you should reflect on your practice, how you show up
Right.
every day in every space, because no matter if you're a leader or not, you're impacting a person. So you should always be reflecting what was my interaction with XYZ? Was that interaction healthy or unhealthy?
Mm-hmm.
And then even as my practice, when we go and do our walkthroughs, did I do a great job being a coach? Did I do a great
Right.
job of motivating, inspiring educators or the scholars that I encounter? Did I do a good job being a leader?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Modeling.
To,
Yeah.
and that is one of the biggest things that I see in education that we do not. I said, even as a teacher, when I was a teacher, I knew what lesson was the bomb. Like, dang girl, you knocked that out. But then I'm like, ooh, Amber, that sucked.
Yep.
Let me
Fix that.
we're gonna go back and we're gonna do that again. And I'm honest with my scholars,
Right.
like y'all. That was raggedy. We're gonna try this again. Even when we do
Right.
professional development, if I make a mistake when I am presenting to the staff, I'm honest, I'm authentic. That wasn't right. Let's go back and do it again. They appreciate that. They appreciate that because they were like, I'm modeling now what you can do as an educator. Because we are human. And a lot of times people don't think we're human, but you need to reflect upon your practices.
And you're not allowed to be. And so if you're not careful in certain spaces, you're also not allowed to be human.
Mm-mm, you
So
should not.
That's right.
So if you make a mistake and you own it,
Right.
somebody will use that as justification for why you shouldn't be in a space.
That's true.
So when you
That's
are authentic and you are transparent and you do have integrity about yourself, it becomes a very dangerous playing field just because,
Yeah.
hey, I did mess up in that XYZ thing. So then you have people who lie or cover or shield and never own their mess because there's a consequence in being authentic.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
That
So
vulnerability as an educator to have really the space to grow.
yes.
When we first started talking about this part, I thought about when years ago, I won't name the school, but I was new and there were veteran teachers who were next door to me that said, I reached out. I reached out. But if you don't feel like you can be vulnerable in the space to say, number one, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I need support. And it was a blessing that those teachers, hey, baby, come in, anything you need. Sit and watch.
Mm-hmm.
Those
And
kind
that's how it
of
should be.
that's the
How
way
it
it should be, but
it's not.
But what I've seen happen
And there are
over the
spaces, in
years,
all spaces, I would say.
All
over the
spaces.
years is number one, a lot of times Black educators are put into positions to hold down the behavior. And so we're being called on to take on some of the most difficult, challenging, unsupported young people. And we all know that after a while, you're burned out.
You tired.
A lot of teachers that I see running for the hills, they are exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that the love and the passion and the concern is not there. It is that they are themselves emotionally overwhelmed. If you are a self-reflective person, which I very much am, and he'll tell you, I'll come home some days and I'm reflecting on the way home. I'm reflecting. I can't sleep at night
Mm-hmm.
sometimes because, and then if you get to the point and you're like, that didn't work, but how do I make it work?
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't know the answer how to make it work, who is my person?
Who's my
Where is
person?
my support? Where is the mentor so that I can move to a place of excellence and effectiveness as an educator? And a lot of times, if you're not in a space where you can be vulnerable, if you're not in a space where there are those type of supports, a lot of educators these days are an island. They're islands.
All by ourselves.
They're
sometimes.
they're by themselves. And I'm sorry, I see the new teachers coming in and they're like, oh, this is what it is.
Mhm.
I'm all alone. You said go in, shut the door with all of these kids. I'm trying to move theory into practice, and no one is here to help. The administrators are too busy. They're overwhelmed. They're trying to answer to all of the gods that they need to answer to. And at that point in time, the teachers who are year 1, 2, 3, 4, they start looking like, I could just go and be an influencer. They
Right.
start thinking of other
Got me
other
going.
So,
career
Mhm.
paths.
so the question is education dead? Like,
Ooh.
what happens when you deal with a living organism that refuses to adapt? What happens? Just think about education as a whole.
I
It's
don't-
still the same model.
Good question.
I don't
And
think
it's
it's
go ahead.
dead. I was gonna say I don't think it's dead, but I think
No.
it's dying.
Well, it's going to become extinct.
Yeah,
Well,
Well, you
not,
see that
Because
they're
if you're
trying,
thinking about if you
but
think about
see
lack of teachers,
the
Yeah,
political
that's what I said. I think
aspect
it's-
of it,
it's
where they're
dying.
intentionally trying to,
right?
they're saying the quiet part out loud. They're letting you know certain
Mhm.
political parties are letting you know we're getting rid of public education.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm a product of public education. I believe my wife is too. I don't know
I
anybody
am.
else.
Yeah, we
I
are.
am.
We okay, you know what I'm saying? So that's near and dear to my heart.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Now, was I the best student? No, but it gave me right. It
You
did
tried.
give me the
Yeah, yeah.
tools. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
For survival. Once I did, and like it was like when life hit, it hit real quick, and I'm like, okay, now that's your aha moment.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's aha. But I was around teachers, black and white, that I knew the majority of them did care about me and my education. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And to see it under attack for me is personal. I take that personal because my children, you know, our oldest son, public education, right?
Right.
Our daughter now, public. Well, like we live right, like a stone throw
We
away
actually
from.
had an experience of public. I'm diehard public, but there have been times in our children's education where public wasn't cutting it.
No,
Mhm.
Right.
not for our son. Not
No.
what we were telling you
Well,
about.
both
My
of, both
boy.
of our sons.
Well, yeah.
And I think that that's
Yeah.
interesting also that both of our black males, they both hit a point for different reasons where the public education system was unable to deliver. And as an educator first, it broke my heart.
Mhm.
And I said, but this is my baby. And so when I do see parents pulling their children and say, what do I need to do? Change my zip code. It after a while, it's not rocket science. You see that if you're in a certain zip code, this is what my child is going to be, this is how they're going to be limited,
Mhm.
you know. And as a parent, it then becomes your job to number one, advocate and to try to shift the situation. And when you're an educator, you're like, okay, but not my child,
That's
not
right.
my baby. What do I need to circumvent? What do I need to do in order for my child to be seen, to be heard, to be
valued.
loved on
You
in
said something
the
powerful.
space?
You said something powerful. Parents.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I love us.
I do.
I love us. I promise I do. One of the challenges that I experienced as an assistant principal, not so much as a classroom teacher, but as an assistant principal and then a principal, was the challenge of parents when you want to hold their child accountable, when you want to make the space safe so that your baby can thrive in that space,
Right.
but this baby over here is preventing that from happening.
Right.
And then when you want to go have those supportive, encouraging conversations, and you get blessed out from one side to the other, because how dare you tell me about my child? Like, I think one of the main things we lost was that it takes a village to raise a child. I think that is one of the biggest things
Accountability.
that has destroyed what we're
Accountability.
trying to do,
Yeah.
because the perception is if you say something to my son, you're out to get my baby.
Right.
And that's not the reality for most of us. Now, there are some people who get out their bed and figure out, what can I do to be evil today? I mean, there
Right.
are those people
Right.
who
Right. That's
exist,
true.
but that is not the majority of educators. That is not the majority of people who are standing in front of a child every day. And so when you walk into those spaces and you're trying to have those supportive conversations with parents and you are getting called everything but a child of God,
Mhm.
it's very difficult for those young teachers, especially if you haven't developed a thick skin. You're
Yeah.
like, I'm not about to, so I'm gonna come to work to get cussed out?
Right.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Well,
So yeah,
Right.
so that's a message to parents. These teachers are they're performing surgery on your child. So you can't be coming in that classroom cussing them out and think they're going to do a good job with your child.
And you guys touched on several key points. I'm a big proponent of, I'm a public school kid all day long, but I'm also a proponent of educational, being an advocate for educational experiences to be, I don't care if it's a charter, private, public. I want all our scholars to enter those spaces. The kids are everywhere. They're everywhere. I want them to have a great educational experience. So our kids went from public to private and back to public.
Right.
So I'm never gonna be like, ooh, rah, rah, rah. I'm all about educating and having educational experience of excellence.
Right.
And one of the things that we talk about, the educational funding for us, that's a barrier. We talk about is so many spaces where as educators we getting dumped. We have so much stuff being dumped on as educators, and sometimes we in spaces we're by ourselves. Because I know I was at a school where it was a time where I was the only Black educator, right? And then everybody loves, you know, from pre-K through fifth, everybody want to be in your room because you the only person that look like them and can handle some of those behaviors. Then you talk about the lack of support for sometimes for our educators that, I mean, not the educators, but our scholars from their family members that need it. But then you got to think about their educational trauma. So like if I came from a space where my educational experience was terrible, I don't really care about, I just sending my kids to school because that's what I have to do. That's what society have to do. So legally I'm gonna go because you know, 9 out of 10, girl, your baby supposed to be here 5 days a week and you bring them 4. I mean, you bring them 2, right? Like, so it's a whole caveat. And for me being in the educational space for 23 years, I see a huge trend of parents that, I would never say parents don't care, but they lack trust. They either lack trust in the educational system or they trust too much. You have a lot of parents who never come to a parent conference, never come to a school event, and they just trust you and depend on you to take care of their baby. Their babies could be sleeping in class every single day and they will not even know because they trust the system to educate their kids. But to go back to the question James was asking, we know all these barriers. Why aren't we talk about everything else but the educational? Our kids cannot read. Flat out. When you go into those buildings, I don't care if it's charter, private, whatever. We have a lot of our kids that look like me that cannot read, write, speak intelligently, code switch, and they have social emotional issues, behavior issues. But as a community, we're not having these conversations. I run a whole sports league with over 400. You got to experience my road dog. He always ride and die with me. And I'm telling you, I have not had one parent that needs to kids on the south side of town come and say, I don't want the best for my kid and don't meet my expectations. Because I'm holy hood, right? I got some ghetto in me too. But I also have excellence in me. When you come up in this space with these kids, you cheering everybody's child on. I expect excellence. And when I come to you and you tell the safety security, tell me you didn't cuss them out, you got to deal with me, but I'm going to talk to you in a way where I can empower you to do something different, teach you a new skill, right?
Absolutely.
And they don't cuss me out after that.
That's
They
right.
was like, well, thank you. Because I want to teach you a new healthy skill that's different because you got to go home and teach your young people, right? But as a community, we have not done a great job of valuing education for one at all. You don't have those Bethune-Cookmans no more where you go to those schools and you just know Black excellence. We had Dr. Bernice Smith. When I came into education, she didn't expect nothing but the best for me. And I was 22, 23 years old. And she expected that out of every African-American teacher that came into her program. Dr. Smith did not play. We don't have those anymore. What you say, the mentors to come into and say, look here, Antoinette, I'm going to pull you to the side. I like these things, but there's some things that you're going to have to change because this is excellence because you have kids that look like you. The professionalism, even in the way we dress.
That's right.
If I see another teacher with some yoga pants, I'm going to scream. There's certain
question
things we
is,
just didn't do.
So let me ask this. Not just the educational community, but do we have a Black community, period, in Columbus? I'm not from here. You did what I'm saying. I'm not so,
Or is
but
that-
I've been here.
Wait,
Yeah.
is that gonna be
That's
your-
gonna be on our
Okay,
next
but-
episode
when we talk
because
about
like I
community,
said,
then we
they-
gotta
yeah, it
because
don't
it's
exist.
so many fractions, like
It's
you said.
boule.
it's
People
It's boule.
leaving
It's
public
boule
education to go to Pickerton, to go to Westerville, to go to New Albany. I coached out in New Albany, and it was my first experience several years ago. I didn't know it was that many of us out in New Albany. It was a shock to me. It just for whatever reason I registered that it was that many of us out in New Albany. But when you see, you know why they're there, sports. You know what I mean? Now the benefit of it is they get all the resources, right? They're going to get top notch. They're going to get fed. They're going to get everything. You know what I mean? Like, how can you deny that? Right? How can you deny a child that opportunity or even their family opportunity if they're getting what they need, even the education piece, better out there? Now, are they being looked at differently from their
Yes.
teachers or the community? Probably so, right? However, you know, when I think of Columbus, I just don't, and I'm not knocking Columbus, you know, I've been here since 97,
Right.
you know what I mean? So I think I can speak on it. I've just seen a transition where, like our children, we've never lived in a neighborhood or area where our children interacted with kids their own age. Our kids
Right.
have always been, whether it was Bexley, whether it was Blacklit,
Right.
whether it was off of Nelson or where we're at now, close by Easton, there's never been kids their own age, which I find interesting. Like a lot of our children's friends, for them to even get with one another or socialize, we have to drive way across town. You know what I mean?
Right.
As opposed to when we were growing up, we could just walk right down the street.
Neighborhood
Next to it
bike.
was neighborhood.
Get on
Ride
that
your bike. You know what I mean?
I was a Coda queen, honey.
right.
Well, I
Number
think
one,
that does.
16, take you straight to my daddy's
Right.
house.
That's right.
If I
think
want to
that
go see
kind
my
of- I
cousin,
think
the
that-
1 to the 4.
That question, though, I think is loaded.
It's
loaded.
loaded.
It's
And
heavy.
I think that feeds into Black people, and I am from Columbus, born and raised.
I know, baby.
Um,
I know.
Columbusite. However, I would say that when we want better for ourselves and for our families, what's happened is people then began to move out, and they're looking at housing. There was a time where housing, it was redlined. You could not just go out to a place like New Albany and say,
Or
I'm going to buy a
Gahanna.
home,
Okay,
or
right.
Gahanna,
Mhm.
or,
Nah.
and so what looked like a choice of Black community in Columbus, I can't speak to other cities, but really was Black people being relegated to certain areas of the city. And then when housing opened up, opportunities opened up, then of course you would have those who have been preparing themselves, sometimes for generations, to take advantage of those opportunities. And what that looks like in Columbus is people began to move out. We talk all the time about a lot of our friends. Their kids are in Pickerington and Gahanna. They're everywhere. There was,
Owl.
but we all went to school together.
Mhm.
And so we often talk about, so imagine if we were all
Still
at
is.
a Columbus City Schools, and we're the parents and we're the ones who are advocating and making sure that people are involved. That now is spread out.
But it's intentional.
Have that.
It's
Well,
intentional.
It's
it-
intentional
it
because
is,
what they
but
do
it
to
is a
every-
multitude of
What do they do to
layers.
every Black
They bringing
community?
them back in.
What do they end up doing to every Black community, whether it's Columbus or St. Louis or wherever it may be? Any thriving
Gentrification is
gentrification, and they end up building what, a freeway or some
real.
type
Right
of
through Mount Vernon.
right. You dig what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
71,
And it's well known. This is what typically happens when you have a thriving Black community in any city or state. Somehow, some way, to expand and it'll make other people comfortable, whatever it may be. They're going to end up building. Am I correct? Because they did that. What you tell me all the time about what Nelson and how it was connected.
670.
670.
Mhm.
670.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we know when we talk about education and we talk about the Black community, we know that it's intentional. We know if you can destroy or hinder the Black community, then you know that education is soon to follow, right?
Right.
And like I said before, we know, and like for me, I take it personal, that education is in the state that it is right now. I'm in transition to be, and I find our dialogue interesting, to be in the classroom. You know what I mean? I've worked for a school district for 14 years now, but now the transition for me to actually be like a lead classroom. Thank you. A lead classroom teacher has been, it's been eye opening. And you say you want me, but then you act like you don't need me, right? And that's what I'm figuring out, especially being a Black male in education, right? So when we talk about the downgrade and education not looking like it should, then we got to talk about, well, who's a majority, who's a minority when we're talking about education. What does that look like? Even public education.
Who are the decision makers?
Who's the decision makers? Because we know it's not us.
Yeah.
Am I right? We know it's not us.
Or if some of us that's at those seats,
Right.
Gatekeep.
they yes, ma'am. And you have to be, when we at those seats, you have to be advocates to make sure that we're not putting in prison to pipeline practices.
Right.
And you have to be brave enough to advocate to ensure those practices are not taking place. And some of us that look like us, they have those seats and they're not brave enough
True.
to
I agree.
say, hey,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
a prison to pipeline practice.
Right.
What can we do to make sure that we're not implementing practices that hurt kids that look like me? Because at the end of the day, no matter where our kids go to school, when you look across the data, our Black kids are in the lowest category for every category and the highest category when it comes to behaviors, no matter where it is. So
No matter your school district,
no matter your school
private.
district, yes. So
That's
my
true.
question, our last question, because we got to end up in this conversation, because it is fruitful and it's loaded.
It's very loaded.
So now that we know the solutions, right? We
Right.
know the barriers. How can we get our African American community to band together collectively to ensure that every scholar that comes into an educational space get a great learning experience? And yes, we know we have parents that just may not get it because that's their environment. That's
Right.
generation after generation. But we can still expose them to opportunity and experiences for them to do better. 'Cause I believe in Maya Angelou. Once you know better, you do better.
Correct.
Right? But you also gonna have the ones that this ain't going. Because at the end of the day, the way it's going, it's not dead yet, but it is dying. And the population that's going to be hit the most is us.
That's true.
Right.
And our future generation of kids. Point blank. It ain't gonna hit the white population. It's gonna hit African American families the most.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So what can we do? 1 minute per person.
1 minute.
30 seconds per person. We got to end up. What can we do to really tap and help bring the community together to start getting back to the value and excellence of education, the educational experience?
Am I up first?
I think you're up first.
Go ahead, whoever. Come on.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
I think we need to acknowledge the fact that we actually are the highest purchasing power. We
Good.
spend $1.3 trillion a year.
So we can put those in the schools. What you trying to say?
We could stop necessarily buying the name brands of people who don't care about us.
Right.
And not to say you shouldn't have nice things. I love nice things like everybody else. But I mean, like, maybe we need to take some time to sacrifice away from the stuff to pour into the future, which would be our children. Now, how do we start having those conversations? I think we need to continue to do this. We need to put these in larger spaces. But I think it's like with any problem, right? You got to find the pain point of the person, because if it ain't a problem for me, right, it ain't a problem for me. So if my existence is beautiful and wonderful and my kids are thriving and they're doing great, I don't really have an affinity for your child that's at Trevitt. I mean, I love them. They look like us. I want them to be great, but I'm not necessarily
Right.
bought into that, because I was able to move to wherever I was able to move to provide the
Right.
life I was able to provide. So the question becomes, how do we create my answer becomes a question, right? How do we get people who it's not impacting every day to care? Because the parents that we struggle with to support, they sending the best one they got. It's not like they're keeping a good baby at home
Right.
for somebody else. So we're getting the best that they have, and we have to work with the best that they have.
Right.
But everybody doesn't care about the best that they have that look like us. So How do we get those people to?
That's the question. Go
That's-
ahead.
Wow, Antoinette. I think that we have to go back to educating our community
Mm.
on our why.
Mm.
I think that our why. I've thought about before. Listen, I have mine together. Mine
Mhm.
are going to be okay. But I think when we're really being honest, what we've all experienced and recognized that when we have worked hard to support and create this great legacy in our children, and we've done whatever we needed to do to circumvent the issues, our children grow up to be adults that need proper companionship, that need
Mm.
proper community. And so when I'm looking and he and we start having this conversation, I said, well, who is our daughter going to marry?
Ooh.
Is it going to be the young man from Trevitt who nobody cared about? So because if that's the case, then we're leaving young Black people without proper companionship,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
without proper community.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I think that we've played that game long enough. Well, mine's fine.
Mine's
And
fine.
then we all reach this point where it's like, okay, I sent my child off to Howard and Hampton, and we've, done this, and that. They've been excellent. They've played at the highest level of sports. Who is their mate going to be?
Mm.
Who are they beginning their families with?
Mm.
Because, and it's larger. So we've forgotten our why.
Mm.
What is the purpose of being educated?
Right.
Mm.
Why did this endeavor begin in the first place?
Why did it begin?
Yep.
I think a lot, and I share this sometimes even with my students. My grandfather, my father, my dad's dad was illiterate.
Mm.
He did not learn how to read until he was in his 40s.
Mm.
Wow.
And so when I think about my own family, listen, sometimes we're one generation,
One.
One.
2 generations away from being plagued with being illiterate, not being able to read and write,
And we're
being
going
limited in
backwards.
opportunity. And I see us going backwards already, and it's terrifying.
Mm.
As Black people in the community, looking at education, looking at public education, our why,
Mm.
the purpose.
I love that.
Mhm.
Love that. I love
Need to
that.
educate and mobilize around that.
I love that.
Armin?
I mean, there's some things. This question is like loaded. Like
It's
my
loaded.
thought process right now is all over the place. Like when we do it takes a village. Going back to the village, the importance of education. I don't think our community sometimes, or even our students, know the importance of why you're here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like back in my home, like I always tell everybody that I was a oops baby because my dad was, he was still here. He'd be 86. So my dad used to always tell me like, hey, education is important. Like he was on my butt.
Right.
Right. And I rebelled a little bit in high school, but I was one of those smart kids. I knew I was going to college. There were some things you can do differently. But when you got older, like you said earlier, like you start realizing, oh, that's why, right? And we
The
don't
aha moment,
have
yeah.
that. We don't have those people. Dr. Smith is the reason why I'm a teacher. Miss Williams, like Miss Williams was my mentor teacher. She pulled me to the side and used to ask me, I used to thought I was doing things incorrect in her classroom. Why'd you do that? Huh? Why? I did it because of this. I do something. No, I just want to see your why. Don't stand on your why.
That's
like
right.
what you said. So we don't.
Metacognition.
I don't feel like we
Think
have
about
that
thing.
right now. Like we have it, but it's here and here and here.
different
It's
pieces.
through you. It's through you. It's through you. But it's missing over here. And then we get burned out sometimes because we're running around and trying to put out these small fires and plant these seeds that we can't always come back and water. And I know but it's just, I think all in all, I think we got to get back to the importance of why we're doing this, the education, that village piece.
Right.
Real quick, I know this is a little point, but like with the whole issue right now in CCS with the school closures, we do know we have some school closures that need to happen, right? Because there's some schools that are not.
Conducive to.
But what are we going to do? My issue is the plan. What are we going to do with that? We could use those buildings for community, right? There was something they did at Livingston a couple years ago when I was there, and after this I'll cut. But they had these community partners come in, and they had a parent class. Granted, it started off with 1, it started off with 2, it was 3, it stayed about 3 or 4, and it wasn't that more. But those parents, you'll start seeing the behaviors of those kids when they came, they reduced because why? You start learning what those parents did.
They're
At
in
Trevitt, it
school.
was the same thing. We understood. We had an issue where a kid got in trouble with a gun or something, and it was like, where's the parent? Where's the parent? But we knew what happened. The parent's working 2 to 3 jobs.
That's right.
Yes.
The parent's always there, but she's tired because you work 2 to 3 jobs. What can we do to help relieve that? And I think that's the
Village.
community
Village.
Yeah.
aspect, and that's my answer. And I'm gonna toss it over to you because I can go on and on and on.
I think what we're doing right here, right now, calling people to task. I mean, it's about accountability. I think we could say community, but what does that look like?
What does that look like?
Because when I was growing up, and I believe a lot of us, when you did something wrong,
Woo!
you got
Whole
called to
neighborhood.
task. The whole
The whole
neighborhood, yeah.
neighborhood.
By the time I made it home, my grandmother already knew what happened. She knew what it was. But you know what I'm saying? They did that phone call and it went up the pipeline. And by the time I made it, she already knew. But, holding each other accountable, having an uncomfortable conversation about education, making people realize that, this is the only way. Not everybody's going to be a football player. If you can make it to the league, I commend you. But everybody's going to be a football player. Not everybody's going to be a social media influencer. Like, it's okay to be a regular person. It's okay to be
Right.
you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Everybody want to be sensational now. Like, be sensational in your own right.
That's right.
Be
Be a sensational plumber.
right, because they make
Right.
good money.
They
That's
make
a good,
great money.
Great money.
They make more money than
and you
teachers.
can take care of your family.
And we
That's
need
right.
them.
Right.
And we need them.
And we need exactly. But I think, like I said, just having this dialogue often and as early as we possibly can with our parents, with our young people, and setting a game plan for them to succeed. I think that's the major thing. I don't want to take too much of a time, but my wife and I, when our daughter was little, and it was at, East Elementary?
East Columbus.
East Columbus. And I forget what it was, but they had the students, graduation, had the students come up and talk about what they wanted to be when they grew up. And so we're talking about the difference between males and females. And a lot of my daughter got up and said, well, I want to be a judge because my dad likes crime shows. And another young lady got up and said, I want to be a nurse. Another one. But then all the young men got up and was like, yeah, I want to be TikTok. I want to be the ultimate gamer. And I think that not having that clear goal set for our young people about what it is that they want to do and what they should do is something, a conversation that we need to start having with our children as soon as possible. So I'll just leave it at that.
Finishing up, baby.
Yeah, I don't got nothing.
Yes, you do.
Belt to ass. We need to bring that back. We need to bring that back.
part,
I mean,
yeah.
we got to
No.
hold. I mean, at the end of the day, we got to hold each other accountable.
True.
We can't take this low expectations. Growing up here in Columbus, Black people was on code growing up. I mean, we had little pockets of dysfunction, but not like it is now.
Right.
Not like it is
agree.
now.
That's
So
very true.
it was belt to ass. I mean, that switch.
So holding each other accountable when you see something,
Yeah.
say something. We was at a games. I won our first Columbus City football games, and a young lady was going past cussing in front of all these adults. Typically, I say something.
Right.
But we was all in our own little dialogue that we just like, oh, but not one of us stopped
Addressed
her
it,
and
yeah.
say,
Yeah.
you see adults right here, tipping when you see adults. You can use that language, but when you see adults, you typically minimize
Yeah.
it. We all cuss back in the day,
yeah,
but we
right.
never done it in front of adults. Like
These kids
having
are too
some,
comfortable.
it's like the kids don't it's like
Boundaries.
the boundaries,
Yeah.
and we haven't set that and it's lower now. It was certain things we just was not allowed to do as
And we're
young
not
people.
peers.
Yeah.
We're not. We're in the same
We're
level,
not, we're
right?
not
Yeah.
peers.
And our kids think they
don't-
are
yeah.
due to social media and whatever.
And we're not going to tolerate them low
Yeah.
expectations.
And we don't
period.
do that anymore, right?
And the parents.
Yeah.
And the parents.
have blurred the lines.
wanting to be their
Opening-
child's friend
Yeah, right.
versus being a
Mhm.
parent.
Yeah,
You
opening
don't get to be
doors
friends
for
until they're
girls,
adults.
right? Like
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
It's a lot of things that we need to get back to, but these conversations are very fruitful, and that we need to have more of these conversations.
Yeah.
I love your point of at the end of the day, you're supposed to disperse great human beings out into the world, but when we do, and no matter if we live in New Albany, whatever, every child's interaction impacts the whole community.
It does.
So it's gonna come back generation after generation,
will.
and we don't.
That's how we got here.
So
Yeah,
drop your
and
mic
we
with
don't.
that.
We don't step up.
We all
Then-
know that family in the
Yeah.
community that,
Like, what's one of the
Our
Yeah,
cousins
you know.
and stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. So thank you guys for
Appreciate
this
you having
fruitful
us.
Yeah.
conversation,
Yeah,
love
thanks.
experience with Dr. Hill, and
James Hill.
we appreciate y'all. But this could be a part two.
Yeah.
Shoot.